Pathfinders of the Dark. Book 1. The Battle of Mars. Episode 4. Chapter 7. The Empty Chairs. The intake shrank. It did not happen all at once. It happened the way the tide went out at Tasker, so slow you could not catch it moving, and then suddenly the strand was bare. 2 candidates were pulled in the 3rd week, quietly, washed out, sent away to fleet billets where the affinity that had nearly killed them would at least never be tested again. One more reached too far in the chair and didn't die, but didn't entirely come back either, and was taken somewhere none of them were told about. By the 2nd month, the bare room that had held 11 held 7, and the empty chairs in the sink hall were not cleared away, and Jax came to understand that this too was deliberate. Sable wanted them counted. He wanted the survivors to look at the empty chairs every day and know the arithmetic of what they were. What the place taught, once you survived the chair, was choosing. Seeing was the gift you were born with. Choosing was the discipline, and it was brutal, and it was the whole of the work. They ran the candidates through scenario after scenario, faster and harder, and the lesson, under all of them, was the same. The branching showed you everything. It showed you the path where you lived, and the path where you died, and the 10,000 paths between. And it showed them all with the same luminous indifference, and a Pathfinder who tried to hold all of them went the way Beck went. The skill, the only skill, was to look into that vast indifferent structure and commit. To choose one thread and pour your whole will down it, and let the rest go, knowing that letting the rest go meant letting go of paths where people you could see, right there, clear as day, did not have to die. Jax was good at it. He hated how good at it he was. The others struggled to choose at all, frozen by the sheer wealth of the branching, and Jax understood that he had a terrible advantage over them, which was that he had learned the lesson at 13 at a yard gate before he had any idea it was a lesson. He already knew you could not save everyone. He had already stood in the one place that taught it. The others were learning it here for the first time, in a chair with their noses bleeding, and it was breaking some of them. It broke Cass. She could see as deep as any of them, and she could not choose. That was the cruelty of it. She had the gift in full, and not the thing the gift required, and every scenario that asked her to let a thread go cost her something she could not afford. By the 3rd month, she was having seizures after the deep sinks, small ones at first, then not small, and the medics started watching her, and Jax knew what was coming before the instructors said it because he made himself look, once, deliberately, down the branching of her future, and almost all the paths where she stayed in the program ended in the cradle going slack. They pulled her on a gray morning that felt like every other gray morning in that place. She found him in the corridor before the cutter took her. She was steadier than he expected, the way people are steady when a thing they have been dreading finally, simply, happens. "They're sending me to a fleet yard," she said. "Drive tech, honest work. Apparently I'm overqualified on account of being able to see 4 seconds into the future, but they'll take me." She tried for the grin and, mostly, got there. "You're going to be the one, mechanic. You know that. Out of all of us. Sable looks at you like you're a door he can't open anymore, and you walked right through." "Cass, don't." She put a hand flat on his chest, brief and fierce. "I get to walk out of here on my own legs. Do you understand how few of us get that? Beck didn't. Half that room didn't. I am washing out, and washing out means living, and I am not going to stand here and be sad about being alive." Her voice caught only once. Just. "When you're out there. When you're choosing. Remember it costs the same for everybody, even when you're better at paying. Don't let them turn you into a thing that doesn't feel the price. That's the only way I've ever seen it actually kill someone. Slow." Then she was gone, up the ramp, and the cutter fell away toward whatever fleet yard would have her, and Jax stood in the corridor with the empty chairs at his back and understood that she had just told him, in her way, the same thing his father had told him in his, and the same thing Sable told him every day without words. He carried something rare and ruinous. The only question that had ever mattered was what it would make of him. Sable found him there. The old Pathfinder stood beside him a while, both of them looking at nothing. "She was right about you," Sable said finally. "You should know that I have spent 6 years going shallower and shallower because the deep places started taking pieces of me that did not come back. You go to the bottom like it costs you nothing. It costs you something. You just have not met the bill yet." He turned his ruined eyes on Jax. "When you do, and you will, I want you to remember that the bill is the proof you were worth the spending. A lens in a drawer costs nothing and saves no one. Now come. There is one thing left to teach you, and then they are going to take you away from me and put you on a ship, and I would like you to survive long enough to be the thing I could not." Chapter 8. The Unwinnable Day. The last thing they taught him against a machine. It was the program's most closely held tool, and Jax had heard the older candidates speak of it in the careful way people speak of a thing that has hurt them. The emulator. A simulation that did not run a scripted enemy, but ran the enemy's logic. The actual mathematics of the weave. A consensus mind that perceived the branching the way a real swarm did and flowed toward the likeliest path exactly as a real swarm would. You could not trick it with a clever script because there was no script. You faced the same cold, broad, shallow foresight the Varithra brought to every engagement, and you matched yourself against it. One human mind against a simulated 1,000. Every candidate before him had done the same thing against it. They had matched it for a few seconds, riding the branching alongside it, and then the breadth of it had overwhelmed them, because a single mind cannot hold as many threads at once as 1,000 minds can, and the emulator had simply walked them down the most probable path to defeat. That was the lesson the fleet instructors wanted taught. Respect the enemy. You cannot outbroad them. Survive, delay, do not dream of winning. Sable wanted something else taught, and he ran the session himself. "They will tell you the point of this is to learn your limits," Sable said, locking the lens to Jax's temple. "That is the fleet's lesson. Here is mine. The swarm is broad, and you are not. You will never hold as many threads as it holds. Do not try. The swarm is also shallow, and it is obedient to its own prediction, and you are neither. So do not match it. Beat it. Find the thread it has dismissed because it is improbable, the one no consensus would ever choose, and choose it, and make it true. It cannot follow you there. It does not believe that path exists." His tremoring hand rested a moment on Jax's shoulder. "Go to the bottom, mechanic. Show me what Beck was reaching for and never found." Then the emulator woke, and Jax went in. It was vast, the way the real thing on the ridge above the colony would one day be vast. A single, seamless intention reading the same futures he read. For the first seconds, it was exactly as the others had described. It flowed toward him broad and certain, closing the obvious paths, herding him the way the swarm at Mars would herd him, narrowing the branching toward the one likely end where the simulated ship died and the simulated mechanic died with it. He felt the old panic rise. He felt how easy it would be to try to match its breadth, to hold every thread, to go the way Beck went. Instead, he did the thing he had done since he was 4 years old. He stopped trying to hold everything. He chose. He found the thread the emulator had thrown away. It was absurd, a line of action so unlikely that the consensus had assigned it no weight at all, had not bothered to defend against it because no rational swarm would expect a single mind to take it. He went down that thread, deep, far past the shallow surface the emulator was reading, and he committed his whole will to it, and he made it the path that was true. And the emulator broke. He felt it happen, felt the seamless intention stutter and fracture, felt the simulated 1,000 try to flow toward a future that was no longer the likely one and fail to find it, because the future Jax had chosen was a future they had ruled impossible. For one impossible instant, the machine that ran the enemy's own logic guessed wrong, all of it, at once. And in the gap that opened, Jax saw, with perfect clarity, the single path to a win the program had spent years insisting did not exist. They pulled him up before he could take it. The session ended hard. Alarms, the lens going dark against his temple, his nose pouring blood down his chin and onto the cradle. The fleet instructors were on their feet and shouting at one another about the readings. Sable simply stood there, looking at him. And for the first time since Jax had met him, the old man's ruined face held something that was not grief. "In 9 years," Sable said, very quietly, under the noise, "I have made it break twice. You did it on the second attempt." He wiped his own bleeding nose with the back of his wrist, an old reflex, and almost smiled. "That is what the enemy is afraid of. Not our fleet. That. A single one of us, going where the swarm cannot follow, and choosing the thing they swore could not happen. They crossed the dark to put an end to people who can do what you just did. Remember that. When you are out there and frightened and certain, you are nothing. They are more frightened of you than you will ever be of them." There was one more test, and it was the opposite of the first, and Sable warned him of it plainly. They would run a scenario with no winning path at all. Not a hard one. An impossible one, built so that every thread, even the deep, improbable ones, even the ones the swarm would never expect, ended in fire. They wanted to see what a Pathfinder did when there was genuinely no path to walk. Most candidates, Sable said, froze. A mind built to find the way out does not know what to do when there is no way out. Jax did know. He had known since he was 13, standing at a gate, watching a crane he could not climb. When the unwinnable scenario closed around him, when he had gone to the bottom of every thread and found fire at the end of all of them, he did not freeze, and he did not stop. He kept choosing. He picked the path that saved the most, knowing it saved no one in the end, and he called it. And when that path burned, he picked the next, and called that. Working the doomed branching with the same steady refusal his father had never seen in him, because his father had died believing the gift was only a thing that watched. He kept calling shots until the simulated ship died around him, and then he sat in the dark cradle and breathed and did not weep, because he had done his weeping at 13 and learned in the doing that the only thing worse than seeing the end coming was looking away from it. When they brought him up, Sable was already gone, called away, and Jax did not see him again. He learned later that the old Pathfinder went into a chair himself a month after Jax shipped out, on a deep sink the fleet needed and no one else could give, and did not come back up. He thought about that a great deal in the years after. He thought the old man had probably seen it coming. He thought Sable had probably chosen it anyway, the way he had taught Jax to choose, pouring his whole ruined will down the one thread that was still worth walking. They gave Jax the lens to keep, and a fleet rating, and orders. They posted him to a human defense ship called the Vigilant Guardian on the inner line at Mars, and told him the captain was a woman named Lara Stone, who had asked for a Pathfinder by name and waited a long time to get one. He understood by then most of what he was. He understood the gift and the cost and the choosing. He understood why the empty chairs were never cleared and why a fishing rig welder's joke had become a kind of reverence and why a burned-out man had looked at him like a door he could no longer open. But he understood it best of all, 2 years later, on the bridge of the Vigilant Guardian, in the first seconds of the night that Mars burned. Episode 5 arrives next week. The ship that asked for him.